Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneur Odyssey. My guest today has spent nearly 2 decades helping entrepreneurs and sales professionals do something most of us do terribly, and that's ask better questions. He's the founder of the Boss Academy, a thriving community of business leaders, and the creator of the Askology Method, a sales philosophy built on a simple but powerful idea. Stop selling, start asking. Before building his own business, he was a radio personality in Dallas and the host of a top 10 business podcast. Today, he coaches founders on everything from prospecting and closing to overcoming the fear that keeps many of us stuck. He's based out of Dallas, Fort Worth. He's been self-employed since 2009. He's living proof that curiosity, not a hard sell, is what actually builds trust and drives revenue. Please join me in welcoming Paul Kirch. Lovely to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Tajni. It's so great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. And I'm really looking forward to digging into today's episode. So I've got a few questions lined up as I always do. So we can dive right in. You've been self-employed since 2009. That's almost 20 years as an entrepreneur. What was the moment you personally decided that corporate life wasn't going to be enough for you and you wanted to go down the entrepreneur route?
That's really interesting. I've told this story a few times, but I grew up in a very small town in western Nebraska in the United States. And we had a person for every day of the year. We had 365 people in our town. And it was a tiny little town. My graduating class had 20 students, I think 21. And they'd never had a class that big. And in fact, when we were 8th graders coming into freshman year, we heard them talking about how, well, we don't know how we're going to handle this big a class. It was just comical. And so I didn't really grow up in an environment for entrepreneurs. You know, around me, there were some ranchers and maybe a few shop owners, but the ranchers did well, but the people that owned businesses really struggled. They weren't great examples of it. My dad was a school teacher, but we had a summer business where we ran a vegetable farm and would plant 10,000 onion plants on hands and knees. And, we'd go to farmers markets and we had a little storefront, but it wasn't a great example of entrepreneurship. We had a coffee tin that my mom would put the money in. We collected from sales and then they'd go to bank when it was filled. We didn't go to the bank that often. So it wasn't like a, great example. But I always had this desire to own a business. I had an aunt and uncle who owned a successful farm and ranch supply business out of Colorado. I was always inspired by them, and we'd see them once or twice a year. And I always thought that they, were people to look up to. And so when I went to school, I had the opportunity to work for the Gallup organization, which is a very well-known polling company. And it was a blessing. And I got some great opportunities. And the more that my career advanced there, the more that I should have been happy, but I never felt fulfilled because I always thought, well, I want to own a company, but I didn't have the courage to do it. I was, the more I went on, the more I got married to that paycheck.
Yeah.
And in time, I think that fear became greater and greater because, if I'd have started a company when I was 18, the risk was low, but as each year passed, it's like it just seemed like the risk was greater.
You get more responsibilities.
I moved into sales because I thought, well, sales is the closest thing to being an entrepreneur without taking that risk. You still get the paycheck, you get all this opportunity, but somebody else is funding that journey. And it ended up kind of being true. It did help me learn how to manage a book of business and do certain things that later came to benefit. But I still always had this nagging feeling that it's like, I just really someday want to own a company. And I had the opportunity to move into sales leadership and over time became a much better sales coach. And I learned that was something I really loved. But I was working for a company that I was running the sales department. I was vice president of sales, and my wife at the time was senior vice president of operations. So we were basically running the company from two different sides of the equation. And the owner was talking to us about taking over the company because he wanted to kind of move on. But then he got an opportunity to sell the company. And the company that acquired us was much larger. And they overnight just kind of changed the culture. We went from loving Sunday nights, couldn't wait to get in the office on Monday, to my wife would be crying on Sunday night.
Oh, no.
And we just dreaded it. They micromanaged us to death. We didn't enjoy the new ownership. And I thought, well, gosh, I've got I've got to get out of this situation or we're going to get divorced because it was causing conflict at home. So
Right.
I, over time, negotiated out of my contract and
Mm.
was applying for jobs in the industry. And they had a pretty strict non-compete on me. So I was in a situation where I really needed to find the right opportunity. I was getting job offers because I was well known in the market research industry, but I kept turning them down. And my
Mhm.
wife looked at me and she goes, "Look, you either need to start this company you've always wanted to start, or you need to take one of these jobs."
Yeah.
And so I figured she was very risk averse. I didn't think she would ever want to do that. But that permission, I always say, she put her size 6 shoe in the back of my backside and pushed me off the cliff. And so I started
Yeah.
my company in 2009 and had no idea what I was doing. But it's been, here 16 years later and I've
Still
figured
very
some things out.
strong.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's amazing. It's amazing. And 16 years is a long time. So you've done very well. And not only that, you've also had a top 10 podcast and
Yeah.
radio show in Dallas, and then you stepped away. What did stepping away teach you about resilience? And why did you then choose to rebuild as a community rather than just relaunch as a show?
Yeah, let me step back and tell you one little piece of the equation that I think will tie it all together. So when I started my company, I said I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't. I didn't really come from an entrepreneurial background. I didn't have those examples. I just kind of jumped into it, not with a great plan. Day one, I had clients because I was doing sales coaching, so I was very fortunate that I was able to bring on clients. I started in 2009, and 2008 here in the States, at least, was a horrible economic year.
Yes.
So that a lot of companies were scared. They were coming to people like me because they're like, we need help with sales. And so my phone was ringing off the hook. And eventually the phone stopped ringing because things had turned around and it became a little harder. But day one, I said, okay, I need to create a support network for myself. And so I started creating what I called a personal board of directors. It wasn't a paid board of directors, but I went out and found, I think there was 9 people from different areas of business. There was a couple CEOs, 1 or 2 sales professionals, somebody from accounting, all these different areas of business. And I brought them together and built this little personal board of directors. Hey, can I call you once a month and update you on what's going on and pick your brain? They all wanted to see me succeed. And that's the one thing that was really interesting. I didn't know some of these people well, but they wanted to see me succeed. So
Mhm.
they were willing to help. So fast forward, I had been invited to a networking event hosted by a fairly large tech company that was doing this tour of the United States. They were putting up these events all over. And I thought, well, it's going to be a sales pitch. I don't want to go. But the
Mhm.
last minute, I thought, well, I'll go check it out. And I went in there, and there's a room of about 70 small business owners. And I am sitting in there, and the speaker comes up and she starts talking, and she was great. And this was a company that was sponsoring the event, and so their speaker was very experienced. She'd done a lot of these. And during the Q&A, she was very intelligent, but she wasn't very good at reading the audience. The audience wasn't
Mhm.
following some of the. She was talking over their head. She was up here, and some of them were down here.
Right.
And so during the Q&A, there was a gentleman who had a YouTube channel that had asked her some questions. And I raised my hand and I said, look, I don't have a question, but I'd love to give some clarification because I don't think he understood what you were saying. She goes, oh, we love that. Please help. And so I gave him some perspective and talked about how I had built this personal board of directors and some of the things I'd done. And the next thing I know, the next hand that went up in the audience to ask a question wanted to ask me a question. And then there was another.
Oh,
And the speaker was gracious. She goes, oh, we love this. This is wonderful.
yeah.
And afterwards, people are coming up and handing me business cards. And it was very flattering. That's like, I mean, I bet half the audience came up and handed me business cards and
Yeah.
asked for mine. And this woman approached me and she said, I'm the general manager of a radio station in Dallas. And she goes, we have some local shows, some syndicated shows, but I'd love to try and get you on one of our top shows in the area. And I said, yeah, it'd be great. So I'm thinking that she'll call me and try and get me on as a guest. About a week later, she did call me and she says, look, she goes, we looked you up. And after seeing how you handled yourself in the audience and looking at you online, we're very impressed. And we've got a new program we're wanting to launch. And we want to know if you would be interested in hosting your own show. I'm like, well, I've never been behind a microphone. And she goes, that's okay. We'll teach you. You come to the studio, check it out. And if you like it, we'll help you get a show started. So I got the opportunity to host a drive time show on Monday nights and hosted that every week for a year. I had to drive about 45 minutes to the studio and I wasn't doing local business. but the experience and the opportunity was amazing. And
Mm.
so I thought, well, you know what? Now maybe the time to launch a podcast is the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And because I can go a broader audience. And they said, well, what if we syndicate your show? And it was going to be expensive. It was going to take some time and it was going to be risky. So I thought, well, I think podcasting makes more sense financially and I don't have to
Mm.
drive to the studio. So I launched a podcast, and in 2017, I ended up on a top 10 business podcast list. So I was very fortunate
Fantastic.
in all of that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
What
incredible.
the reason I stepped away was because I was going through a divorce after all the
So
I went through with the company acquisition. Our
mhm,
marriage just never really turned around and we ended up
mhm.
getting divorced and I wanted to take care of my kids and I shut the show down in 2017. It was a really hard decision, one that I at the time was like really kicking myself over, but I was really burned out. I was stressed out. I had gone from doing 3 episodes a week and
That's a lot.
a video recap every Friday to an episode a week, then an episode every other week, an episode when I felt like it, and my
Mhm.
listenership went from here down to here because you set an expectation for your audience. You
Yeah.
asked a question, and I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but the thing I learned is that consistency online is
Mm.
more important than the quality even. If you put out very consistent work and you set an expectation for your audience, if you do daily posting, for
Mm.
example, all of a sudden you go to weekly, you're going to lose people because
Yeah.
people set an expectation. They fill your time slot with something very quickly. You know, people
Yeah.
that are expecting to
Mhm.
hear your content will quickly go away and fill something else in there, not because you weren't valuable, but
Mm.
especially in this day and age, there's so many things thrown at us
There
that
is.
it's hard to
Yeah.
keep people's attention. So one thing that I would do if I was to do it differently, you know, going through the divorce, I really made the right decision to shut the show down, even though it was hard.
Yeah.
But consistency is key. And
Mhm.
I didn't have an editing team. I'd hire editors, but I never thought they did a good enough job because I came out of radio and I wanted the quality to be the same as I had on radio. Good
Yeah.
audio, I wanted good editing. So I did all the editing myself. If I could go back in time, I would have definitely set lower expectations and had somebody edit and stuck with a consistent schedule. Because
Yeah.
online, that is so critical.
Yeah. That's really great advice. Really, really great advice is consistency. Because like you say, you're building your audience. And they're expecting something. And the other thing is, yeah, our attention is being pulled in so many different directions. So really great point.
I mean, and since 2017, I mean, post COVID, at least here in the States, I assume it's that way everywhere. We're just inundated with messaging. And, you know, and
Yeah.
I don't begrudge anybody who wants to start a business. When I did it, when I started my company in 2009, I mean, obviously entrepreneurship wasn't an unheard of, but most people weren't making that leap. You
No.
know, I have friends that idolized me, said, "Oh, you know, it's like I could never do what you did. It's so amazing." I'm like, "What? Work more hours, make less money, and have all the stress that comes with entrepreneurship?" I somewhat say that jokingly. But that's what, you know, the badge of honor that we kinda wear sometimes. But today,
Yeah.
it's super sexy to have you at least have a side project if you don't have a
Yeah.
full-time business on the side, and,
Mm.
you know, it's everyone's putting up a coach label on LinkedIn, or at least I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of new people. What do they put? Coach or
Yeah.
consultant. Well, when I was starting, consultant meant you were unemployed. Now today, coach and
Um,
consultants, the 2 labels that seem to
yeah.
be very prevalent. So we're competing against so many more messages out there.
Absolutely.
Everyone's trying to stand out with a voice. You know,
Mm.
you've got your podcast. There's
Yeah.
lots of podcasts out there. You know, the interesting thing about podcasting, I mean, I think I did 450 episodes that were published. I had more that were recorded, some that never got launched.
Wow.
And I think the average podcast has 1 or 2 episodes. So people start them and don't
Really?
complete them. So, you know, you are light years ahead of a lot of people that jump into this.
Yeah, I've got a few episodes actually out already, and we've got quite a few more that are in the pipe. So, and I
Yeah,
love it. I absolutely love it because for me, it's a vehicle for learning. Like
yeah,
sales is something that is my Achilles heel, and that I am learning every day. So having this conversation is incredibly valuable, and I know the content is very valuable to our listeners as well.
yeah. You know, and I'll tell you, there's one more piece if I can add to that because I think
Sure.
it's relevant to what you're doing. The other piece that I learned about podcasting and even the radio, the guests were far more valuable than the audience. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want listeners. Listeners are important.
Mm, mhm.
That 5 to 10 minutes before an interview and that 5 to 10 minutes after can be life-changing. I mean, I've built relationships with people that I could have never gotten in front of if I didn't have a show. John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple Computers, I interviewed him 4 different times.
Oh,
Nobody
wow.
has access to that guy. I've
Yeah.
got his cell phone number in my phone. I could call him and reach his team and talk to him today. I
Wow.
don't say that to brag. I'm just saying I would have never gotten the opportunity to meet somebody like that had it not been for broadcasting.
I couldn't agree with you more. Some of the fascinating people that I've interviewed, including yourself, it's been life-changing and just so incredible. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. But I really want to pivot and ask you more about the Askology
Sure.
method because I'm hoping that I know that we do have listeners and I love this idea, right? So the idea of stop selling and start asking. So for someone who's never heard of it, what's the single most common mistake you see entrepreneurs make in sales conversations that Askology directly fixes?
Well, to put it in simple terms, all buying decisions take place at an emotional level. And as much as we don't want to believe that, so Jeffrey Gitomer, who wrote the Little Red Book of Selling and the Sales Bible, I don't know if that he coined the phrase, but he owned the phrase. He used to say, "People hate to be sold, but they love to buy," and that's such a true statement. People love buying, but they are super alienated the minute they feel like they're being pitched. And so this idea that we're selling something that we can talk people into buying, it doesn't work. And we sell from the logical brain, but we buy from the emotional brain. And the logical brain is selling features and benefits. When we create something in our companies, we fall in love with it. We fall in love with the things that make it tick. Oh, we made this new feature. Oh, this is so cool. Our clients are going to love this. But what are they buying? They're buying the thing that's like, okay, how do I keep my lights on? How do I pay my staff? How do I prevent the company from going under? How do
Mm,
I take this money that we have in surplus and put it to use so that we can scale the company? So they're
mm,
buying things that have a different meaning, and we're selling them the things that are easy to talk about because we fall in love with them, and we believe that that's what they're buying. But we don't buy the way that we sell, and that's the one
mm.
thing that I think is the biggest mistake. And so asking questions gets at the root of understanding what's their hurdles, what's their needs, and so can I give you a little bit of an overview of what Askology Method is?
Please. Yes, I definitely want that.
So, in my early days of selling, I had the opportunity to work with a great mentor, and he always taught us to be a resource. And by be a resource, he didn't just mean provide better customer service. He meant, if somebody needs something, if they're looking for a job or they need support in some way, help them. And so over time, I just got better at asking questions and I would uncover these really interesting things that people were going through. And so I started looking at the types of questions that were resonating. And so there's 4 different question types that Askology centers around. There's the leading questions or guiding questions. And these are questions you probably know what they're going to say. You probably have an idea of what kind of response they're going to give, but it allows you to talk about your brand in a consultative way. Like you're responding to their what they say. You're not pitching. So
Mm.
that's the thing. We
Yeah.
got to get away from this idea of everyone wants to pitch, pitch, pitch. Well, we don't want to pitch. We want to be in a place where we're helping drive the conversation.
Mm.
And then there's investigative questions. These are the ones that we don't necessarily have answers to. Maybe you need to know what kind of advertising budget they have or what kind of hurdles they're facing, what kind of supply chain issues they're dealing with. And so you ask these questions, and with that information, now you can provide answers or you can talk about your brand in a way that supports them because now you've uncovered some things. But we are people talking to people. So the personal side of things, maybe that the company is facing some economic downturn. They've laid off some staff and they're dealing with internal pressure. So empathy questions allow you to connect with them at a very personal level. Maybe you ask them questions about, hey, what are those layoffs doing? What's the morale like in the company?
Mm.
Well, right now everybody's kind of, nose to the grindstone. Everybody's working hard, but they're stressed.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I know their staff is stressed. What can I do to help them? What can I do to be a solution? And then maybe the fourth question type, I always jokingly call this gently poking the bear. instigating questions are ones that you have to be careful with because you're touching on something that could be a sensitive subject. But I've had many situations where I find out that another vendor screwed up something on a project that I'm in now talking to them, and they have this instant distrust for all vendors.
Yeah.
But if I can show them that, hey, listen, I know you went through that with them, but
Mm.
here's a process we have to prevent that from happening. If you can uncover what some of those topics are, like for
Mm.
maybe example, like I said, maybe a vendor made a blunder or some sort of internal strife is happening, and you can tap into that. You can say, well, so tell me about this issue. Why did that vendor let that happen? And they might tell you something. So what did that do in terms of your trust for other providers? Well, quite frankly, we think that they're all the same. What if I could show you that we've actually addressed that issue years ago and put a process in place to prevent that from happening? Now all of a sudden you can connect with them at a level that you couldn't before. And those are the things that really ultimately they're buying is trust,
Yeah.
safety, security.
Yeah. 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 Uh, that is fascinating, and like you say, people are buying on an emotional level, and it's being
Yeah,
able to empathize and connect them. I love that advice.
thank you.
Thank you. So you mentioned when we spoke previously that I think are 13 modules inside this method.
Yes.
Everything from active listening to assumptive selling to negotiation. If you had to pick two that newer founders almost always skip and later regret, which would they be?
Well, I mean, I think that there's one that stands out above all of them that people claim to be good at, but most people are not. Like I was an experienced salesperson and I had this opportunity to work with this company in California that was they had some very large projects. They had this multi-million dollar media testing study, and I was working for Harris Interactive at the time. And I knew that if I could find out where they were doing the work and some details about that work, that I could get a portion of that. I knew that we had the team for it. We had the scalability. There was nobody else that really could match our capabilities. So I
Mhm.
just needed to uncover some things. And the woman I was working with was tough. She was originally from Russia. She did not give up a lot. But I knew
Mhm.
that if I could get in front of her that I could ask the right questions. So I came up with a plan. I talked to my boss at the time, and he was the mentor I mentioned, and I
Yeah.
said, "Here's what I wanna do," and he goes, "Yeah, that's a great idea." He goes, "Look, I've been meaning to come out and spend some time with you on a tour of clients." He goes, "Why don't I come out? We'll spend a week together and do some meetings, and I'll join you."
Oh,
I said, "That sounds great." So I scheduled it and had this plan. I talked to him about what I wanted to do, and he says, "Yep, I think that makes total sense. So we'll get in this room and I'm having a conversation, showed him a few PowerPoints, but also was asking questions. When the opportunity came up, it couldn't have been more perfect.
hmm.
She set it up. I asked the question, and I'm like, "Oh, this is awesome." So I get out in the parking lot afterwards, and I'm talking to my boss, and I'm like kind of giddy. I'm like, "Oh, this meeting was so great." And I said, "Man, that was a great meeting." He goes, "Yeah, yeah, it was pretty good." I was like, "What?
Oh,
Pretty good? That was a home run. What are you talking about?" He goes, well, let me ask you a question, Paul. He says, when you had the opportunity to dive in and you had this plan, you wanted to ask her these questions. What did she say? I said, yeah. He said, you're right. That is interesting. She didn't really give up much. And he goes, oh
mm,
no, she gave up everything. You were just too busy worried about the next thing coming out of your mouth. You didn't even hear her.
uh,
Oh my gosh, it was like a gut punch, doesn't it? I mean, it was like I felt like sick to my stomach. I said, "What? Wait a minute.
um,
She answered me?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "I didn't hear it." He goes, "I know." And I didn't either because you were too busy. You talked right over the top of her. You cut her off and you missed the opportunity.
oh gosh.
I was sickened over it. So you said two things. I think it comes down to being comfortable asking better questions in a way that's natural, in a way that creates trust. But active listening isn't just something that happens by accident. Everyone
Mm,
claims to be a good listener, but very few people really are. The old adage that there's two ears and one mouth, you should be
yeah.
listening twice as much. It's funny, but it's true.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be somebody that leverages questions, you better be willing to listen and not just hear words, but understand where they're coming from. Because if they
Mhm.
are buying from an emotional place, the words they say are one thing, but how are they answering the question? And what are they really ultimately meaning? And if you aren't courageous enough to dive in deeper and, if they throw you a bone, they say something and you don't tap into it, you're missing an opportunity. So I really think it does come down to asking better questions, but really learning how to listen and learning how to take that and become a better consultative seller, a resource.
Mm,
Now, the other thing I'll tell you is be a resource. And that means that you want to really understand their needs and be somebody that provides solutions. I've talked to people over the years that refuse to make referrals because they don't want to look bad if it doesn't go well. Well, it's
mm,
not my fault if I introduce you to somebody. If I think, Tejneet, you can help this person, and
yeah,
I don't introduce you, that's a missed opportunity for you and a missed opportunity for them. Now, if
yeah,
I introduce you to somebody and it doesn't go well, yeah, okay, that's too bad. It's a shame. But if I approached it from the right perspective and I really was trying to help,
yeah.
then I think it's worth that risk. Be a resource. Those are the three things that I think matter. Ask questions, listen well, and always
Mm.
be a resource.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Always be a resource because it goes back to providing value. We all
Mhm.
want to provide value to our customers, and being a resource is part of that. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and the thing, all the modules, they all come back to one thing, and it's all foundationally based off of asking better questions. So I've got a friend, she's a incredible negotiation expert, and she has a book that's called Ask Outrageously. And that whole book is around the premise of if you don't ask, you don't get. And I learned that years ago. If I don't ask, I don't get. I used to embarrass my kids because if I wanted something from a restaurant, I would ask. I wasn't rude. But
Yeah.
it's amazing what I've gotten over the years because people generally are more open to helping you than you think.
Yeah.
And if you show them respect, what's wrong with asking? You may not get it, but why not ask? So negotiation, assumptive selling, these are things that all require uncovering needs.
Yeah. No, that's if you don't ask, you don't get, right? That's the
Right.
old analogy. I like it. I want to talk a little bit about your follow-up fortune module, excuse me.
Mhm.
So I understand that it drives home that fortune is in the follow-up. You mentioned in our pre-chat that it now takes 7 to 13 touch points to convert a prospect. How do you train people to stay consistent across that many touches without burning out or coming across as desperate?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're hounding somebody with 7 to 13 calls in a week, you're not gonna get anywhere, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it does require using some common sense, but, the sales statistics are very telling. Those are not numbers that I came up with. 7 to 13 is what the new standard is for
Yeah.
sales conversions among sales professionals. And most salespeople that have a list are out there making one or two outreaches and they give
Mm.
up and they move on. How many
Yeah.
times have you heard, Tejneet, or even maybe said yourself, "Oh, I've been ghosted"? People say it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you being ghosted or are you just not a priority to that person? Do
Yeah.
they have other things going on? When you go to
Mhm.
conferences or networking events and you talk to somebody and it's like amazing conversation and you walk away from that going, "Oh, this was so great. I can't wait to follow up with them."
Yeah.
Well, what happens? You get back, they're busy, their
Yeah.
life is taken on other challenges.
Yeah.
Maybe their spouse is demanding something, their boss wants them to do
Mhm.
all these other things.
Yeah.
Their work's piling up on their plate. At that networking event, they were a captive audience, right?
Mhm.
Their attention was on you. They didn't have other distractions. They get back, now all of a sudden, you're just a nuisance. You're a salesperson. You're calling them because you want something out of them, and they've got all
Mhm.
these other things that are a priority. So,
Yeah.
what does it take? I think it takes common sense, but it also takes really thoughtfulness. So, I don't send marketing content to everyone. Like, I don't do 7 marketing messages.
Yeah.
I might go out and say, "Oh, you know what? Tejneet has this really cool podcast. I just found this really neat episode that was about how to conduct the most high impact interviews. I'm going to send that to her." Now, that's not something I created. It's not a
No.
sales message from me. "Hey, Tejneet, I saw this video and I thought of
Mhm.
you. I think
Yeah.
this might help you with your show. You're already a great interviewer, but this is something I listened to and I thought, man, this could take me to the
Mhm.
next level." I might even go, "Okay, so at the 15-minute mark, here's why I sent this to you." And I'll make a note in the email, send it to you. Now all of a sudden you get this and it's like, well, that wasn't a sales message. So this is something Paul just sent
Mhm.
out of the kindness of
Mhm.
his heart.
Yeah. I love it.
And now all of a sudden you have a trust for me that
Yeah.
I'm not just in it for me. And So your touch points don't have to all be sales messages, don't have to all
Mm.
be messages. I look for things that I can send to people. If I see that they spoke at an event, like if on LinkedIn somebody posts that they just spoke at some conference, I'll send them a message saying, "Hey, I just saw you spoke on such and such at the that recent event. That looked really great. Is there any chance I could get a copy of the recording? I'd love to hear it." Everyone
Fine.
loves to be patted on the back like that. Oh, wow, that's like somebody paying attention.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
another touch point. So when you do voicemail messages are something that I don't expect people to respond to my voicemail messages. But what I do expect is they're going to hear my voice, or if they get the transcription on their phone, they're going to see that I messaged them. So when other efforts take place, now all of a sudden it's like that top of mind awareness. There's a trust that comes from that. So I've been to events before where I had left people messages and I get there and I'm talking to them, and all of a sudden they're going, "You know what? I owe you an apology." Why? Because you left me a voicemail message. I haven't returned it yet. And it's still sitting on my phone as a reminder to call you when I have time.
Right.
Oh, well, that's great. But we're here together now. Let's talk. So that top of mind awareness is a form of trust.
Yeah. Amazing. And I love that. And that's the thing, not every touch point needs to be salesy, because if it is, then they're more likely to turn off. Right. So
Yeah, as much as you can make it about them and less about you, the better.
yeah.
If you do send them something, customize it if you can. Not everything has to be customized, but if maybe you've got a one pager. Hey, I'm sending you this one pager, but here's
Mhm.
why I'm sending this to you, and make some notes in the email. I'll tell you a quick
Right.
story if that's okay
Sure.
about being a resource and on this topic. So there was this company in California that they had a very specialized niche business, and they didn't do a lot of project work that my company could support, but occasionally they did. And when they did have them, they were large, but we're talking maybe once a year. And so it was very hard to get their business, but I stayed in touch with them, and I would actually set up Google alerts, and I would actually look for content that I could send to them.
Mm.
So every month I was sending them something, like a new video, an article, and I would occasionally reach out and touch base and say, "Hey, just letting you know I'm going to be in California. If you have anything coming up, I'd love to stop by." "No, nothing right now, Paul. We'll let you know." This went on for, I want to say, close to 2 years of
Oh.
me reaching out to them. One day I get a phone call, and it's he's now the president of the company. At the time, he was second in command behind the CEO. He said, "Paul," he says, "next time you're down here, come in because we'd love to talk to you about a project." And I said, "Well, I'm going to be there next week, and I can stop by." Perfect. I had no plans of going down there the next week, but I knew that this was a big enough opportunity, and I need to get down to California anyway. So I scheduled a couple days worth of meetings at some other places and went over to see them. And I'm in the conference room, and great meeting. They're talking about this project. It's a perfect fit, and we can definitely help them. And afterwards, the CEO walks out, and this other gentleman whose name's David says, "Hey, come with me. I want to show you something." So he walks me into this office, and there's a wall of filing cabinets, and he opens this one file drawer, and he pulls out this green folder, and he says, "You recognize any of this stuff?" And it was probably about that thick, and it was everything I'd sent them over the last couple of years. They'd printed off
Really?
articles,
Wow.
references to videos, and he looked at me. He says, "We have kept everything you've sent us, and we've used some of those for workshops." We actually, in George's last book, he referenced something that you'd sent us. He goes, "Paul, nobody does this." He says,
Mm,
"Really appreciate all that you've sent us."
I love
And
this.
I didn't even know it was making an impact, and they were keeping it. They were using it, and they saw me as different. So
Mm.
not everything has to be a promotion.
Be a resource. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. That's incredible. That's 2 years of building that connection, that relationship.
Yeah.
That's
Not getting anything in return and feeling like, "Am I wasting my time?" And in fact, everybody on my team, my boss included, said, "They're a waste of time. Don't waste your time with them." And the project I got in more than paid for all that time.
nice. Well, great job on that. That's amazing. I'm going to pivot now and talk a little bit more about technology. You've said that honestly, you haven't yet perfected the way to automate or fully leverage AI in your business. What's held you back to this point? Is it time, in the tools or something else?
I mean, trust in the tools. I mean, I think we all recognize where AI currently is. I mean, there's still a lot of hallucination. We have to be careful about how much trust we put. I see a lot of bad content out there that's AI created that people have stopped even putting the human touch in it. So there's that piece of it. But I think for me, it's more I'm busy doing, I'm busy with clients. It's hard to manage that. I don't have a lot of resources, so I'm limited on, I don't know, I have a big team that I can say, hey, go create these GPTs. So I think a lot of it comes down to I'm not taking the time like I could. I'd love to become more versed, but I also want to make sure that it's not preventing me from serving my clients.
Yes,
So
that's
it's
fair.
really a time thing more than anything. But I think there is a level of we all have to be very careful about how we use AI. AI is great.
Mhm.
And I use it every day in some capacity. I write copy. I'm a copywriter as well. So when I write copy, I'll write something, I'll put it in a chat GPT, see what it outputs, and then maybe I'll make some changes from there. I don't use AI typically to write and then edit. I'll do it the other way around because I still want it to be from Paul.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so this is probably going to sound like a strange question given what you've just said, but if AI could handle every touch point from initial outreach all the way to booking a discovery call autonomously, however, you could write the copy, right? You could write
hmm
the copy in terms of the initial outreach, the responses, but AI could automate that. Would that make your members better or worse sellers in your mind?
Well, I think it's it's a really great question. If it could be automated and high value, high touch, I don't think that's a bad thing. However, I do think that, you know, if you think about somebody who has uh, a leg in a cast, that leg's going to atrophy a little bit. It's going to shrink. I do think we're shrinking a lot of muscles. I do
Yes.
think that we're becoming often lazy marketers, lazy writers, lazy salespeople. I think
Mhm.
that it's still important to keep your hands on the daily of how do I do it? How do I perfect this and stay strong at it? I think that it'd be great from a business perspective, but are we making better business people out of this? I don't know. Arguably, no. But that being said, automation that works and is high touch and high value to the buyer is never a bad thing. It's just that's the one thing I would caution is how do you keep yourself from losing the ability to do it on your own? Because let's say that something happens where there's a huge bust or technology, like let's say that the internet went down, like there's a
Mm.
worldwide outage.
Yes.
I mean, the economies are going to crumble anyway, right? But how do people stay a, ahead of some of these challenges?
Yeah.
That's just the you know, fear mongering that takes place in my little head. But yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can do something that's high touch, high value, and takes the burden off of you, it's a good thing. But
Yeah.
there is that other side of it. It's like, well, how do we keep from becoming less skilled than we are? And I think that it's already kind of happening. That I know people that were good writers that don't write on their own, and then they really struggle when they have to do something manually.
It's really, really fair points and really valid points. And I think we'd all be lying if we didn't share some of those concerns, to be
Yeah.
honest. I personally do. Anyway, I think where's the balance between us using our brains and asking AI to use our brains for us to some extent. So I think really valid points. I want to move on to the future and the vision of the Boss Academy and the Askology Method. What, still an intimate community, or do you have in the next 3 years? Do you envision the community to grow and scale? What's your vision, I guess, for both?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, in the perfect world, yes, I would love to scale Boss Academy. So, Boss Academy, the community started in 2021. So, my podcast was called Boss Academy Radio. The radio show was called Boss Academy Radio. Boss Academy relaunched in 2021 as a community. That was the next progression. It's been slow to grow. We have a decent size membership, but it's never scaled to the point where it's like a standalone business. I would love it to grow. but we have to be careful that we grow it in a way that doesn't totally change the dynamics of what we created. We have this amazing support network, and everyone that's a member, we've built such friendships and trust, and everyone feels like they've got support. I know that that would, if we had massive growth, we'd have to find a way of either protecting that or morphing that. So yes, it'll grow, but I want it to be slow and steady growth.
Slow and steady. That's fair. You don't want to grow it to a point where it's hard to manage, right?
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice you'd give your 2009 self, the version who had just gone independent and was figuring out how to build a business from scratch?
Outsource where you can, build a team around you. You don't have to go it alone. Doing it on your own, being a solopreneur is great to a point, but it's not scalable, and scale faster so you've got some stability. Because it has been a roller coaster ride. There's been times where the resource drain has been a challenge, and there's been times where it's not been an issue. But I think that scalability is something that I wish I would have gone in with a scalable plan from the beginning. I put on the coach label just like everyone else in my network did. It's a great place to start, but it's not a full-time business.
Good to know. Good to know. What's one piece of advice you would give to new founders now then?
Build a team of support around you, like that personal board of directors I talked about. Find people in your network that want to see you successful,
Yes.
and don't think you have to go it alone.
Yeah.
Find a group like Boss Academy, whether it's Boss Academy or some other organization. You need to have a place where you have a sounding board, because you're going to face challenges, and be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Like
I think that's important. That's right.
So, final question for you, Paul. For anyone listening who wants to go deeper with you, where should they start? The free Askology ebook, a Boss Academy meeting, or something else?
Well, sure. You can always schedule with me at let's see, bookwithpaul.com. I'm on LinkedIn under Paul Kirch, LinkedIn/IN/Paul Kirch. Those are two great places. Or come out to askologymethod.com and download the free ebook, or paulkirch.com, and let's connect from there. Because I think, once you see what the methodology is about, that it will help lay a foundation for how I can help you.
Well, I've taken a look at the website and looked at a couple of podcasts that you've done previously, and even from our conversation today, I've already learned so much. And so I'd really encourage anyone listening today, take a look at the Boss Academy and book a meeting with Paul for sure. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Tejneet. You're amazing. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening to the Entrepreneur Odyssey. We will be back with another episode very soon.
I've got a